Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my review of the death battle between Android 18 and Captain Marvel. For those of you that are new to these reviews, I focus less on the animation and humor of Death Battle and instead focus on the research and critical analysis. You see, I wish to improve my own research and critical analysis capabilities, and these prediction and review videos are a perfect way for me to do so. This video will consist of me going over what I got wrong in my prediction, what I got right, and then what I learned. Let's begin. First, what I got wrong. Almost everything. I got the winner dead wrong. This is even worse than Sub-Zero vs. Glacius. At least that fight was super close and easy to get wrong. This match wasn't that close. It was so blatantly a win for Android 18, and yet I somehow managed to not only conclude she would lose, but also that she would lose hardcore. This was due in part to me missing a few of 18's capabilities, but mainly because I just misinterpreted everything. First, let's look at what I got wrong with Captain Marvel. I based my conclusions on her strength off of her breaking adamantium. Problem is that this feat is nullified by the context in which it occurs. You see, there was some reality warping business going on, and that's what let her break the adamantium. It wasn't a result of her own strength. I should have picked up on that fact because she has never demonstrated the kind of strength needed to accomplish this feat. I was even aware that Hank Pym had, in a recent comic, concluded that her max current strength was 92 tons. I just totally misinterpreted things. Same goes for my analysis of her speed. First off, I measured her speed using a different character's feat. That should have been a red flag that I was going down the wrong path. But even worse, in her most recent comics, she has, on multiple occasions, stated outright in very precise detail what speeds she is capable of. But rather than use that very recent and specific information, I decided to go with my misguided, self-calculated rogue feat. Because I'm stupid. And while it's true that Captain Marvel can ascend into a form of binary, it's not the original binary, and as such does not have the advantages of the original binary. It's really just an enhanced version of Captain Marvel, and while it is impressive and all, its power is nothing compared to the original binary, as demonstrated by the fact that this binary was shot down by ordinary blasters. You wouldn't see Android 18 getting affected by ordinary blasters like that. Speaking of 18, I made a number of misinterpretations regarding her capabilities, although almost all of them stem from me just being lazy and not wanting to thoroughly research 18. This, of course, stems from my bias against the series. Looking at Dragon Ball ticks me off, so instead of going the extra mile and researching her character, I instead just used what knowledge I had and did minimal research. Starting with her strength, I used the foolish conjecture about Goku's capabilities instead of just looking at what Vegeta had achieved leading up to the fight. In reality, Vegeta's strength at the time in his base form was 27.5 tons, as shown by his training and 450 times Earth gravity. And when he goes Super Saiyan and his power is multiplied by 50, his strength goes up to 1,375 tons. This is a much more precise measurement of what Android 18's strength likely is. In terms of her speed, I made a very simple and stupid mistake. I used Goku's Super Saiyan speed from the end of GT, and obviously he is much faster at the end of GT than he was during the Android Saga. In reality, the bare minimum speed of a Super Saiyan at the time of the Android Saga is about 340,000 miles per hour. Now that I have a better comprehension of the gravity formula, I can say with confidence that this is just 18's bare minimum speed. She is likely faster, but even with just the minimum speed, she still clocks in as over 100,000 miles per hour faster than Captain Marvel. Something I didn't realize she could do was absorb energy. This wasn't something they ever pointed out in the manga or anime, but it is a staple abilities of hers in the games. Now, while the legitimacy of the games as a source is debatable, Death Battle has always been willing to use questionable canonical sources provided that it is reasonable, and 18 having the ability to absorb energy is far from outlandish. It makes a fair amount of sense considering who created her. However, while you may have your own opinions about the choice to use the games, I have no right to complain because in the past I have used video games as a source for the characters I was researching, particularly with the Megazord. So my choice to not look at the games for Android 18 was a blatant double standard that stems entirely from my bias against the franchise. An advantage that 18 has against Captain Marvel that I just didn't recognize is the fact that while Captain Marvel may have more total experience, 18's experience as an android for Dr. Gero row prepares her for fighting someone like Captain Marvel. The Captain had nothing that 18 hasn't seen before, and more importantly, 18 has first-hand experience with energy absorption and would recognize when it's being used against her. In fact, this battle is doomed to end up in 18's favor in the energy absorption department because Captain Marvel's battles follow a particular formula. Enemy uses energy blast, the Captain absorbs the energy, multiplies it, and sends it back with extra force. Problem is, that won't work against 18. She'll just absorb the extra strong energy blast, and having seen and recognized what Captain Marvel just did, she won't use any more energy blasts. Instead, she'll just use the power-up she just got to stomp Captain Marvel into the dirt. Literally. In fact, 18's energy absorption is straight up better than Captain Marvel's for this fight. Both can absorb each other's energy blasts, but only 18 can directly suck the life force out of a person by grabbing them. This is actually doubly bad for Captain Marvel. Her defenses are boosted by her energy supply, but that works in reverse too. As her energy gets sucked out, her durability is only going to get lower and lower, and at the same time, since she's absorbing Captain Marvel's energy, 18 is only going to get stronger and stronger. And as we know from her battle with Rogue, Captain Marvel doesn't do so hot against foes who can suck her life force out with just a touch. Sure, Captain Marvel held her own for a bit, but Rogue still eventually overwhelmed her, and Rogue didn't have infinite stamina. Captain Marvel may be more skilled, experienced, and tactical than 18, but that doesn't mean squat against someone that just outclasses you in your base stats. Like, you could be the most skilled, strategic, knowledgeable warrior the world has ever seen, but if your opponent is 15 times stronger and too fast for you to see, then it doesn't matter. Another mistake was how I interpreted Android 18's ki powers. I stand by what I said that her ki is totally different from other characters and thus she still can't be compared to other characters, but the fact that her energy is sufficiently similar to regular ki that she can learn the other characters' techniques, such as Krillin's Destructo Disc, was something that I should have picked up on. This didn't really matter for the fight, but it was still a mistake on my part. And the last thing I got wrong was with regards to 18 kicking Goku's Kamehameha. I personally think she just kicked Goku, but since it's sufficiently debatable, I should have assumed that she kicked the beam, if for no other reason than to give her the benefit of the doubt. That's about everything I got wrong. Now for what I got right. Almost nothing. I knew their backstories, and I knew most of their powers, even when I apparently had no clue what the true limitations of those powers were. My research was mediocre, and my analysis was garbage. And that's about it. Now for what I learned. This was easily the biggest fail of a prediction video I've ever made. The good news is that the bigger the fail, the more opportunity there is to learn. And that is certainly the case here. The first thing I learned is that my bias is still very much so present and in full force. Furthermore, I learned that my bias can manifest itself in numerous ways, some of which I wasn't even aware of. For example, this was the first time that my bias was able to actively cause me to not research a character. Like, I didn't even notice that my research into 18 was well below the standards that I normally hold myself to. That's part of what makes bias so menacing. Not only does it totally warp your objectivity, but it also makes it so that you don't notice it's happening. That's actually kind of scary. As such, while this isn't a new lesson, it clearly bears repeating. I need to thoroughly look over my conclusions to ensure that bias did not play a role in their inception. The next thing I learned is that if a character accomplishes something that is way more impressive than anything the character has ever achieved, then you need to take a closer look at the context, because in all likelihood, something in the context will nullify the feat. Like, Spider-Man once punched the Hulk into space. That actually happened, because he had borrowed Captain Universe's powers at the time. You see? Another thing I learned was that when comparing two contradictory accounts of what a character can do, it's always better to go with the account that is more canonically supported. For example, if you're trying to figure out how much Earth that Toph can move, and you have to choose between her barely holding up a castle in the main series and her casually creating mountain ranges in the Chibi series, then it's probably better to go with the castle feat since that's part of the main canon, whereas the mountain range feat is a part of a goofy, over-exaggerated spin-off series. Another old lesson that I clearly didn't learn was that I need to give these characters the benefit of the doubt when looking at their feats. For example, if a feat has two equally valid interpretations and one paints the character in a good light whereas the other does not, then it is my responsibility to use the one that paints them in a good light because that's the only way to pay the character with the respect that they are due, and thus the only way to do them justice. And the final lesson that I should have learned by now is that I need to look over my conclusions and test them with counter-arguments. If I just come up with these conclusions without testing them, then I will have no way of knowing whether they are strong and legitimate conclusions or not. And that's just about everything I learned, which means we've reached the end of the video. I am incredibly disappointed and embarrassed in my performance this time around. This was a pathetic excuse for a prediction. I barely learned anything new, and I mostly just fell for the same old traps. As you may recall from my previous failure on Sub-Zero vs. Glacius, I am fine with making mistakes, but I am not fine with failing to learn from my mistakes, and I failed from so many of my mistakes in this prediction, and that is just unacceptable. I guess I could chalk it up to my Dragon Ball bias hampering me, but that's just an excuse, and I know it. It's important for me to learn from my failures, not only for my own sake, but for you guys' sake as well. I may be awful at thinking logically, but I'm great at selling an argument, even when that argument is complete nonsense. Like, I spread so much misinformation in my prediction video for this, and I am not okay with that. As such, I promise that I will never fail this badly again. I will still make mistakes, but by George, I'm gonna make new mistakes. I'm not gonna be stuck here spinning in circles, tripping over the same low bar. I'm gonna trip over higher bars. Anyway, I hope you guys found some worth in this fiasco. Like if you enjoyed the video, comment if you got something to say, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.